I'm joined today by Marcus Weber, who is a co-founder of Landview Drones. Now, drones have been popping up a lot more frequently on farms, whether it be for checking fences or field scouting. It's now evolving into helping with spraying. What can you tell me about this?
The imaging with drones has kind of been developing over the last 4 to 5 years already, and there's a lot of good sensors out there. There's still some development necessary on that, so we are doing some work on just imaging where specific weeds are. I know there's other companies that are focusing on other weeds, but our very specific focus is on Canada Thistle. So we're using multispectral cameras to image where there's patches of thistle. And then we're going to go take drones and spray exactly those patches. So we're working on that entire workflow as a way to kind of build that workflow for other weeds as well.
Why is Canada Thistle the weed that you guys are targeting?
So in our area, Canada Thistle is very important commercially. I mean, there is a lot of pressure from thistle and it's a yield robber. It also has deep roots, so it can survive a lot of herbicide treatments without ever really having any control impact. And because of those deep roots, we find it really interesting as a first test case, and because it's patchy. So it makes sense to spray those with a drone where you're only spraying 10% of the field rather than the whole field. Whereas with more common weeds that are spread across the entire field, it still makes sense to use a ground sprayer.
What are the benefits of using drone spraying compared to, say, conventional ground spraying?
Farming's complex, right? So in some circumstances, it's a lifesaver. If you're spraying on a mountainside, you're spraying in a rice paddy, in water that has snakes in it. I mean, this beats walking through that. And it lets you access areas that you otherwise can't access. Here in Western Canada, that's less the case, although we do have some of that as well. So I could see spraying a lot of pastures, vegetation control along waterways, that type of thing, ultimately. And then on broadacre farming, I think the real promise is for smaller patch spraying. The drones that we have now, like this Agris that I've got sitting behind me, they will cover quite a few acres already. You can also swarm them, so you can fly 5 of them at the same time. And by doing that, you really increase your acreage coverage by 5 times.
What are the results of your research showing you so far? I know the research isn't done, but what are you finding?
Well, we were really pleasantly surprised with the technology. I used to be a bit of a downer on spraying drones just because they are small. This has a 20-liter tank. Compared to a ground sprayer, that seems pretty darn small. But I'm very impressed with the spray patterns, the flow meters, all the technology that's built into this. I mean, this particular model has pulse width modulation on what is essentially a front virtual boom, and then 2 more pumps for the back boom. So the amount of technology that's already built into these and how easy they are to operate has been probably the biggest surprise so far. We haven't really got into much spraying yet. There are other regulatory issues we need to get through so that we can get operating them routinely and commercially. But within a year or 2, I suspect they will become much more commonplace, especially as smaller models can be operated in swarms. 10-liter models, for example, for farmers in a swarm of 5, I think might work quite well.
That's really interesting. So like in the future, when drone spraying is more commonplace, you think farmers will still do like the big tank for, the very common ones, but then kind of do spot spraying with the drones?
I suspect we will still have ground sprayers for a burn-off, for example. The drone still requires a lot of battery changes, and until we have much larger drones, it's going to be much more practical to use your ground rig.
Thank you so much for joining me. It was great chatting with you.
Thank you for your time. Thanks for your interest.